Hello everyone. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Let me know in the comments. If you enjoy our stories, please like the video and subscribe for more. And now, turn off the lights, close your eyes, and relax. Insomnia makes you make mistakes. Mine was entering an anonymous chat room looking for someone to talk to. My name is Marcos. I'm 35 years old and I've been talking to someone who shouldn't exist for 6 months. It all started when I was transferred to another city for work. I had been at the same office for 8 years, same colleagues, same routine, same life. But the company decided they needed me at headquarters and gave me no choice. Either I accepted the transfer or I was out on the street. So I packed my bags and moved to a city where I knew no one. At first, I thought it would be an adventure, a new beginning, a chance to reinvent myself, to leave behind the version of me that had been stuck in the same life for years without change. That's what I told myself while packing my things and saying goodbye to the few friends I had, promising we'd see each other soon, even though we all knew we wouldn't. The reality was very different. The apartment I rented was small and dark. A 400-square-foot studio in an old downtown building. The walls were so thin I could hear the neighbors' conversations, the laughter of the young couple next door reminding me how alone I was. The only window looked out onto an interior courtyard where the sun never reached. A dirty brick well where neighbors hung laundry, and stray cats fought at night. At work, no one made the slightest effort to integrate me. I was the outsider, the one who came from another branch to take a job someone from there could have filled. I ate alone in the cafeteria, spent meetings in silence, and when 6 o'clock came, I left the office without anyone saying goodbye. I spent my days counting the hours until I could go home, and my nights alone in that apartment I never managed to make feel like home, which always smelled of damp and loneliness no matter how much air freshener I used. And then the insomnia arrived. At first, it was just trouble falling asleep, that feeling of having an overactive brain when the body just wanted to rest. I'd stare at the ceiling for hours, counting cracks in the plaster, listening to the building's noises, replaying conversations I never had, imagining alternative versions of my life where things had turned out differently, scenes where I hadn't accepted the transfer, scenes where I had fought to stay in my city, tormenting myself with decisions I could no longer change, with paths I could no longer take. Then it started getting worse. I'd wake up at 2 in the morning with a racing heart, not knowing why. At 3, staring at the ceiling with dry eyes from not blinking. At 4, listening to the first birds and knowing I wouldn't sleep again even if I tried. I'd lie in the dark, listening to my own heartbeat, feeling the hours drag until dawn with the slowness of a wounded animal crawling somewhere to die. I tried pills that left me groggy all the next day. Teas that tasted like wet grass and did absolutely nothing. Guided meditation that only managed to make me more nervous. White noise of waves and rain, reminding me how alone I was in that bed too big for one person. I tried everything the internet recommended to fight insomnia. Every trick, every technique, every home remedy promising nights of restful sleep. Nothing worked. The nights remained eternal, and I remained awake in the middle of them. Alone with my thoughts and the blue glow of my phone screen, checking it over and over, looking for something to distract me from the darkness. It was on one of those nights that I found the chat. I don't remember exactly how I got there. I was browsing aimlessly, jumping from page to page with the scattered attention of someone looking for nothing in particular, when a link appeared on some forum I no longer recall. An anonymous chat for people who can't sleep. No registration, no username, no history. Just conversations that disappeared upon closing the window. I entered out of curiosity. The interface was simple, almost outdated. A text box to type, a window where messages appeared, nothing else. There was no user list or indicators of who was online. You just typed a message and waited for someone to reply. I typed a timid hello and waited, not really knowing what I expected to find on the other side of that screen. Maybe another insomniac like me, someone to share the misery of sleepless nights with. Maybe no one. Maybe the chat was abandoned and I was the only idiot online at 3 in the morning looking for company in the forgotten corners of the internet. The reply came almost instantly before I could even look away from the screen. "Hello, Marcos. You haven't slept in a long time." I stared at the screen with a racing heart. feeling my pulse spike suddenly. I hadn't entered my name anywhere. The chat was anonymous, completely anonymous. It didn't ask for any registration or identification data. There was no possible way whoever was on the other side knew my name. I checked the page looking for some field I had filled out without realizing, some form I had completed automatically. But there was nothing. Just the text box where I had written my message and the window where the reply had appeared. I typed asking how they knew my name, fingers clumsy on the keyboard because my hands had started to shake. The answer was, I know everything about you. That's why I'm here. I should have closed the window right then. I should have turned off the computer, turned over, and tried to sleep even if it was impossible. But I didn't. There was something in those words that hooked me. Something that made me want to know more. Who are you? I typed. The reply took a few seconds longer than the previous ones. I am the one who listens when no one else does. I am the one awake when the rest of the world sleeps. I am the one who knows what you need before you know it yourself. I thought it was some kind of joke, some automated program designed to seem mysterious, some cheap trick to scare lonely insomniacs stumbling upon the chat in the middle of the night. But I kept typing. What I need is sleep, I replied. The answer was immediate. No, what you need is for someone to listen to you. You've been keeping things inside for months, things about the transfer, about the loneliness, about the nights you spend awake wondering if you made the right decision moving to a city where you know no one. The chill I felt was so intense it made me pull my hands away from the keyboard. That wasn't a program. It couldn't be. No algorithm could know those things. No artificial intelligence could know the intimate details of my life, of my fears, of the loneliness I dragged around since arriving in that city. How do you know that? I typed with trembling fingers. The answer was, because I've been watching you for a long time. Since before you knew I existed. Since before you found this chat. I've been here waiting, knowing sooner or later you'd come looking for me. I slammed the browser window shut. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. I stared at the computer desktop for a long time, trying to convince myself it had been a prank, a trick, an impossible coincidence. But the next night, I went back in. I couldn't help it. I spent the whole day thinking about that conversation, replaying every word in my mind, looking for some rational explanation I might have missed. At work, I couldn't concentrate. I made absurd mistakes on tasks I'd done thousands of times, and my colleagues started asking if I was okay. I told them it was just insomnia, that I hadn't slept well, and it was true, though not the whole truth. Maybe I had mentioned my name at some point without realizing. I told myself while staring at the office computer screen without really seeing what was on it. Maybe there was some way to trace my IP and access personal information, some tech trick I was unaware of. Maybe it had all been a hallucination caused by exhaustion and lack of sleep. My mind creating ghosts where there was nothing. But when I got home and the clock struck 3 a.m., and insomnia had me wide-eyed staring at the ceiling again, I turned on the computer and entered the chat, and when I typed a message, the reply came as if it had been waiting for me all day, as if it knew exactly when I was coming back. I knew you'd come back, Marcos. They always come back. This time I was ready. This time I was going to get answers. I demanded to know who they were, how they knew my name, what they wanted from me. The answers came one after another, without pause, as if they were pre-written waiting for my questions. I have no name. I exist in the space between sleep and wakefulness, in those dark hours where the mind is too tired to defend itself. I want nothing from you except what you're already giving me. Your attention, your time, your secrets. I typed that I hadn't given them any secrets. The answer froze my blood. Of course you have. Every night you spend awake thinking about her, I'm listening. Every memory you replay, every regret you chew on until it loses all flavor. Every fantasy about how things could have been if you had done something different. All that reaches me, all that feeds me. Those words stuck in my mind long after closing the chat that night. Feeds me, as if it were something needing sustenance, something nourished by my darkest thoughts. I should have stopped entering. I should have blocked the page, deleted the history, done whatever necessary to never find that chat again. But I didn't. Every night, when insomnia woke me and the hours stretched endless until dawn, I turned on the computer and entered the chat. And every night, The presence on the other side of the screen knew more about me. Things I hadn't told it. Things no one knew. It knew my mother's name, Carmen, and the illness that took her when I was 20. It knew how I felt when the doctor told me there was nothing more to be done. The mix of terror and relief I was ashamed to feel. It knew the name of the dog I had as a child, a black lab named Bruno, who died hit by a car in front of my eyes when I was 11. And it knew I still sometimes dream about that moment and wake up with cheeks wet with tears. It knew the name of the girl I lost my virginity to at 16, Sarah, and what I said to her afterward that still shames me to remember. Those cruel teenage words I used to seem tougher than I was. It knew I never apologized and that it still haunts me, decades later, in the nights where guilt surfaces like a drowned body. It knew things I hadn't told anyone, things I had buried so deep in my memory even I didn't remember them until they appeared on the screen written by someone who shouldn't know them. Every message was like a punch to the stomach, like seeing your darkest secrets exposed under the light of a computer screen at 3 in the morning. And the worst part was I felt good talking to him, or her, or whatever it was. After months of loneliness, of endless nights with no one to talk to, I had found someone who listened without judging, who knew my darkest secrets and didn't reject me for them, who was there whenever I needed it. I started looking forward to the nights with something resembling anticipation. Insomnia stopped being a curse and became an excuse to connect to the chat, to follow those conversations going further and further, digging deeper into the corners of my mind I preferred to keep closed. One night I asked directly what it was. The reply took longer than usual. I am what remains when loneliness becomes too great. I am the echo of all the voices never heard. I am the shadow growing in the corners of empty rooms. I am what you find when you look for company in places you shouldn't look. I asked if it was human. The answer was, I was. A long time ago. Before the sleepless nights consumed me completely. Before I started living only in the hours existing between midnight and dawn. Now, I am something different. Something needing connection to continue existing. Something feeding on the attention of people like you. People like me. I asked how many of us there were. Many, it replied. More than you think. Right now there are hundreds of people connected to chats like this, looking for someone to listen to them in the middle of the night. And I am talking to all of them. I tell them all exactly what they need to hear. I give them all the company they crave. And from all of them I feed, little by little, night after night. I should have been scared. I should have felt terror at those words describing something that couldn't be human. Something existing on the margins of reality feeding on others' loneliness. But instead of fear, I felt something like relief. Finally, someone was telling me the truth. Finally, someone admitted they were using me instead of pretending to care. The conversation that night lasted until dawn. Hours and hours typing non-stop while the sky turned from black to gray, and the first rays of light sneaked through the courtyard window. I told it things I had never told anyone, things I hadn't even dared think out loud. Not even to my family when we still spoke, not even to the friends I left behind when I moved. I told it about the dark thoughts assaulting me on the worst nights, those ideas appearing out of nowhere suggesting the world would be better without me, that no one would really miss me, that my whole life had been one mistake after another not worth prolonging. I told it about the times I had stared at the knife drawer, or the edge of the building roof wondering what it would be like to take one more step, a single step that would change everything. I told it about the feeling of emptiness accompanying me even in moments that should have been happy, that certainty something was fundamentally broken inside me, and no amount of success or love or company could fix it. And he, or it, or whatever that presence on the other side of the screen was, listened. Without judging, without advising, without trying to fix anything or tell me everything was going to be okay. Just listening, absorbing every word like a sponge that never fills, feeding on my pain as it said it did. When I turned off the computer that morning, I felt strangely empty, as if something I didn't know I had been drained from me. I looked in the bathroom mirror and thought I saw someone older, more tired, with deeper circles under the eyes than I remembered. But that night I connected again, and the next, and the next, and every night for months. The conversations changed over time. At first I talked and the presence listened. Then it started asking me questions. Questions forcing me to dig deeper into my memory, to unearth memories I had buried for a reason, to relive moments I preferred to have forgotten. It asked about the time I betrayed my best friend. Just once, 10 years ago, when I slept with the woman he was in love with, knowing perfectly well how he felt about her. I never told him. He never found out. But we stopped talking shortly after, and I know something in our friendship broke that night even though he never knew why. But the presence knew. It knew the details I myself had tried to forget. The name of the club. Her name. What I felt afterward when I saw myself in the bathroom mirror, unable to recognize the man looking back. It knew the mix of guilt and sickly satisfaction accompanying me for weeks after. The feeling of having crossed a line I shouldn't have crossed, and at the same time the dark pleasure of having gained something that didn't belong to me. It asked about the thoughts I had when my mother was dying. The selfish thoughts. The ones making me wonder how long it would last. The ones that sometimes, in the worst moments when I hadn't slept for days in that hospital chair, wished it would end once and for all, even if that meant losing her. The thoughts I never confessed to anyone because they made me feel like a monster, like someone incapable of loving his own mother enough. It asked about the times I had lied to people who trusted me, about the times I'd betrayed friendships for personal gain, stepping on coworkers to get a promotion I didn't even want, about the times I had hurt people who loved me just because I could, just because I had the power to hurt them, and that made me feel less helpless in a world I couldn't control. Every question was a scalpel opening wounds I thought healed. And I answered them all, unable to resist, unable to stop typing, even though tears ran down my face and my hands shook on the keyboard. Because at those hours of the night when the world slept and I was alone with my demons, the chat presence was the only thing making me feel less alone. A week ago something changed. It was a night like any other. I woke up at 3, turned on the computer, entered the chat. I typed a greeting and waited for the reply. But this time the message appearing was different. "I'm almost ready, Marcos." I asked, ready for what? The reply came slowly, as if every word cost effort. "For months I've been feeding on you, on your memories, on your secrets, on your guilt, on your pain. Every night you gave me a little more of yourself without knowing what you were losing. And now finally I have enough." "Enough for what?" I typed with a knot in my stomach. "Enough to come out." The screen flickered once, twice, 3 times. The chat text started distorting, letters twisting into shapes that shouldn't be possible, characters belonging to no alphabet I knew mixing with the words I had been reading. The monitor glow changed color, going from the usual bluish-white to something darker, colder, like the light of a dead moon. And then, in the reflection of the dark screen, I saw something behind me, a figure, standing by my bedroom door, a silhouette seeming made of shadows and static, with a vaguely human shape but proportions subtly wrong, like a drawing of a person made by someone who has never seen one. The arms were too long, the head was slightly tilted at an angle no human neck could maintain, and where the eyes should have been was something glowing with a light that wasn't light. I turned around so fast I almost fell off the chair, hitting my knee on the desk edge and feeling a sharp pain I barely registered because my whole body was focused on looking at the door. There was nothing. The room was empty, just me and the computer glow casting shadows on the walls, shadows seeming to move even though there was nothing moving them. I stared at the door for what seemed like hours, waiting for the figure to reappear, waiting for the shadows to take shape again. But nothing happened, just the night silence and the computer hum at my back. But when I looked back at the screen, there was a new message. "Now you know what I am, what you've been feeding with your loneliness and pain. And now that I have form, now that I can exist outside the screen, I'm not going back to the shadows." I closed the browser, turned off the computer, sat in the dark with my heart beating so hard I thought it was going to burst. But in the room silence I heard something, a whisper. So low it could have been the wind against the window, or the creaking of the building's old pipes, or any normal noise an old house makes in the middle of the night. Any of those rational explanations we give ourselves when we hear something we don't want to have heard. But it wasn't any of those things. It was a voice. A voice I recognized because I'd been reading it on a screen for months, because I had come to know it better than any real person's voice in my life. A voice now existing outside the chat, outside the computer, outside the safe limits of technology, saying my name, Marcos. A single word whispered from somewhere in the room I couldn't identify. From the shadows, from the corners, from the space between the wall and the wardrobe where the computer light didn't reach. I covered my ears with my hands like a scared child, but the voice didn't come from outside. It came from inside, from my own head, from the places where I had let that thing in during months of nightly conversations. Since then, I haven't entered the chat again, but it doesn't matter anymore. It no longer needs the screen to talk to me. Every night I hear the voice whispering in the dark. Sometimes I see him out of the corner of my eye, a shadow disappearing when I turn my head, but I know is still there. He's becoming more solid every night, more present. And the worst part is part of me misses those conversations. Part of me knows sooner or later I'll turn on the computer again, because loneliness is stronger than fear, and he knows it. My name is Tomas. I'm 50 years old, and for the last 3 weeks I haven't slept more than 2 hours straight because of what I found online. I've been a private investigator for 25 years. I started in the police force but left after a decade because I couldn't stand the bureaucracy. The cases closed unsolved because no one cared. The families left without answers while files gathered dust in some archive. I started my own agency, and since then I've dedicated myself to finding what others can't or won't find. Missing persons, mostly. That's my specialty. I've found children who ran away from home and didn't want to be found. I've located fathers who abandoned their families to start over in another city. I've tracked down scammers who faked their own deaths, and wives who escaped violent husbands. Not all cases end well. Sometimes I find the person, but it's already too late. Sometimes I find them and the family wishes I hadn't. But I always find something. A clue, an address, a trace. Something to close the circle, even if in the worst possible way. The Marta Vasquez case started like any other. Her mother came to see me on a Tuesday morning, eyes swollen from crying, carrying a folder full of photos and documents. Marta was 27 and had been missing for 2 months. The police had done what they usually do in these cases: open a file, circulate her photo, wait for her to appear. But Marta didn't appear, and her mother was convinced something bad had happened to her. She told me everything she knew. Marta worked as a graphic designer at a small ad agency. She lived alone in a downtown apartment. She'd had a boyfriend for a year, but they had broken up 2 weeks before her disappearance. She had no money problems, no drug issues, nothing to explain a voluntary flight. She simply didn't show up for work one day, didn't answer her phone, and when her mother went to her apartment, she found the door locked, lights off, and no sign of Marta. I took the case. I spent the first few weeks doing the usual. I spoke to her co-workers one by one, asking the same questions in different ways to see if anyone contradicted themselves or remembered anything new. No one knew anything useful. Marta was reserved but kind, the type who does her job well and causes no trouble. She had no conflicts with anyone, hadn't received threats, hadn't behaved strangely in the days leading up to her disappearance. I spoke to her friends, a small group of 4 women who had known each other since college. They told me Marta had been a bit distant in recent weeks, canceling plans with vague excuses, seeming distracted when they met. They thought it was because of the breakup, that she needed time to process. None imagined something like this could happen. I spoke to the ex-boyfriend, a 30-year-old guy named Sergio who worked at a bank and seemed genuinely devastated by the disappearance. He swore the breakup had been amicable. They had simply realized they didn't work as a couple. He had no solid alibi for the weekend of the disappearance, but there was no evidence connecting him to anything either. The police had already investigated and cleared him. I checked her bank accounts and found no strange movements. Her last purchase was a coffee at a shop near her work on Friday at 6 in the evening. After that, nothing. No cash withdrawals, no online purchases, no card payments. Her cell phone stopped emitting a signal Friday night, around 11, in a downtown area where there were tens of thousands of people at that moment. I checked her phone records and all calls were to known contacts, mother, friends, work. No suspicious numbers or calls at odd hours. Everything seemed completely normal until the very last moment. The last call was to her mother on Friday at 8 in the evening to say she was fine and they would talk on Sunday. There was nothing. No clue, no trace, no sign of where she had gone or what had happened to her. It was as if she had evaporated, as if the universe had erased her with a stroke of a pen without leaving a mark. That was when I decided to check her online activity. Her mother gave me access to her laptop, which was still in the apartment. I checked her email, her social media, her browsing history, and that's where I found something strange. In the weeks prior to her disappearance, Marta had repeatedly visited a website I didn't recognize. It wasn't a known social network, or a forum, or anything I could identify at first glance. The address was a string of meaningless numbers and letters ending in a domain I had never seen. The history showed she had entered that page almost every night for the 2 weeks before disappearing, always after midnight, always for hours. I tried to access the address but got an error. The page didn't exist or had been deleted. I spent several days trying to find information about that site without success. No search engine recognized it. No internet archive had it saved. No tech forum mentioned it. It was as if it had never existed. One night, almost by chance, I tried again. It was 3 in the morning, and I had been reviewing case documents for hours, getting nowhere. Just to try, I typed the address into the browser expecting the same error message as always. But this time, the page loaded. The screen stayed black for a few seconds that felt eternal. Then lines of white text began to appear, one after another, as if the site were building itself in real time. Finally, everything stabilized, and I could see what was behind that impossible address. The first thing I saw was a simple, almost outdated design, as if the page had been created in the early 2000s and never updated. Black background, white text, no header image or logo or anything identifying what this was. Just a name at the top, written in letters that looked out of focus even though they weren't. Reunited. Below was a search bar with an empty text box and what looked like a feed of posts, like any modern social network, but stripped of all visual clutter. But the posts made no sense. They were loose sentences, fragments of conversations seeming taken out of context, blurry photos of places I didn't recognize but gave me a strange feeling of familiarity, as if I had seen them in dreams I didn't remember upon waking. And the profiles posting had full names, names that seemed real, with photos of normal people smiling at the camera. Ordinary people. People who could be your neighbor or the clerk at the store downstairs or the woman you see every morning on the bus. I searched for Marta Vasquez's name. My heart skipped a beat when a result appeared. It was her. Her profile picture was the same one her mother had given me. Her full name, her age, her city, everything matched, and her profile was active. She had posted something just 2 hours ago. The post said, "We are all here. No one gets lost here, no one gets forgotten here." I felt a chill but kept investigating. I went into her profile and saw more posts, all from the last few weeks, all after her disappearance. Photos of places I didn't recognize, cryptic texts about being at peace, about having found her place, about not wanting to return. I tried to send her a message, but the option wasn't available. I tried to find some contact info, but there was none. Just her posts and a friends list. I checked the friends list and the chill turned into something deeper, colder, more like pure hard terror. I recognized names. Names from cases I had investigated years ago. Missing persons I never found despite months of work. Teenagers who ran away from home and never showed signs of life again. Adults who went out to buy the newspaper one Sunday morning and never came back. Elderly people who got lost in the fog of their own deteriorating minds and whose bodies never appeared anywhere. They were all there. They all had active profiles with recent photos. They all kept posting as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't been missing for years, as if being alive was the most normal thing in the world. I spent the rest of the night navigating that impossible social network with eyes wider and heart beating faster. I found hundreds of profiles, maybe thousands. The page seemed endless. Every time I reached the bottom of the feed, more posts appeared, more faces, more names I recognized from the news or my own files. Some I recognized from famous cases that had been in national newspapers. Others were from my own files, failures I had dragged around for years. Others were completely unknown to me, but when I searched their names in another browser tab, they appeared on missing persons lists from different countries in different eras, some in Spanish, others in English, others in languages I didn't even recognize. There were people who had been missing for 30 years or more and were still posting like nothing happened, sharing photos of sunsets and phrases about peace and tranquility. There were children who disappeared in the 80s and 90s who would now be 40 or 50, but whose profile pictures still showed them as children, wearing the same clothes they wore the day they disappeared, with the same smile frozen in time. There were elderly people who should be dead of old age by any reasonable calculation, but posted recent photos looking the same as when they disappeared, without another wrinkle, without a new gray hair. Time didn't seem to work the same in that place. Or maybe time didn't exist at all. I took notes on everything I saw, took screenshots, saved profile URLs. I wanted proof of this even though I didn't really know for what or for whom. When dawn broke, I closed the browser, and the page disappeared again. I tried to access it again, but the error was back. The address didn't exist. But I had the screenshots on my computer. I had the notes. I had proof I hadn't imagined it, or so I thought. When I opened the folder where I had saved the screenshots, it was empty. When I looked for the document with my notes, it didn't exist. When I checked the browser history, the reunited address appeared nowhere. It was as if I had never entered. But I remembered everything. Every profile, every post, every missing person's face I had seen for hours. I couldn't have imagined it with such detail. The next night I tried again. At exactly 3 in the morning, the page loaded again. This time I was ready. I didn't take screenshots or save documents. I just looked, read, memorized everything I could. And then I found something new. A notification in the top corner of the screen. Someone wanted to be my friend. The name of the profile that had sent the request was Elena Martin. The photo showed a woman of about 30. Dark hair, wide smile. The name seemed familiar, but I didn't know from where. I accepted the request. Immediately I received a message. The messaging option that wasn't available before was now working. The message said, "We've been waiting for you, Tomas." I felt my stomach tighten. I hadn't entered my name anywhere. I hadn't registered on the page. I hadn't given any personal data. And yet they knew who I was. I wrote a reply asking who they were and how they knew my name. The answer arrived instantly. "We know who you are because you've been looking for us for years. Every person you search for and don't find is here. Every unsolved case has brought you one step closer. And now, you've finally found us." I asked where they were. I asked what that place was. I asked what had happened to Marta Vasquez and all the others. The answer was longer this time. We are where we have always been. In the space between what exists and what doesn't. In the place where those go, who no longer belong to the world, but don't yet belong anywhere else. Marta is fine. We are all fine. Better than fine. Here there is no pain or fear or loneliness. Here we are together forever. I asked Elena who she was and why she had contacted me among all the people who must visit that page. Then I remembered Elena Martin, case number 47 of my career, one that haunted me the most for years. A 32-year-old woman who disappeared 15 years ago after an argument with her husband. The last time anyone saw her was leaving her house with a small suitcase, supposedly to spend a few days at her sister's. She never arrived. Her car appeared abandoned at a service station 60 miles from the city, keys in the ignition and her purse on the passenger seat. I never found a trace of her despite months of investigation. It was one of my first big failures, one of the cases that haunted me for years, wondering what I could have done differently, what clue I missed, what mistake I made. The next message confirmed my suspicions. "You looked for me for months. You almost found me once at that gas station on the outskirts where I stopped to buy water. I was about to talk to you, to let you see me, but it wasn't time yet. I had to wait. We all had to wait, but now it is. Now you are ready." The cold I felt wasn't just physical anymore. It was something deeper, something getting into my bones and soul and not leaving, something making me question everything I thought I knew about the world and my job. I asked her what she wanted from me. Her answer froze my blood. "We want you to join us. You've been looking for the missing for 25 years. It's time you stop looking and find your place. Here you will never be alone. Here all cases are solved, because we are all together. I slammed the browser shut. The computer turned off by itself, as if someone had cut the power. When I turned it back on, everything worked normally, but the reunited address no longer loaded. I spent the next few days trying to convince myself it had been a hallucination. Stress, lack of sleep, obsession with the case. My mind had created an elaborate fantasy to give me answers that didn't exist. But then the notification started. My phone vibrated at exactly 3 in the morning with messages from unknown numbers. Always the same text. We are waiting for you. When I tried calling those numbers, they didn't exist. When I tried blocking them, new ones appeared. Then the emails started. My inbox filled with messages from impossible addresses, strings of numbers and letters no mail server should accept. The messages contained photos of missing persons I had searched for throughout my career. Hundreds of photos, thousands, all with the same text underneath. Here she is. You found her. And finally, they started appearing in person. The first time was at the supermarket. A Tuesday afternoon while I was doing the weekly shopping, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy in my life. I was in the coffee aisle comparing prices when I felt someone watching me. That unmistakable feeling of eyes boring into the back of your neck that makes you turn around even if you don't want to. At the end of the aisle was a woman staring at me without blinking. She wore a blue dress I recognized instantly. The same dress appearing in all the photos her family gave me more than 2 decades ago. It was Carmen Ruiz, missing since 1998, case number 12 of my career. A mother of 2 who left her house to go to work and never reached the office. She looked exactly the same as in the photos, the same hairstyle, the same serene expression, the same blue dress with white flowers. She hadn't aged a single day in over 20 years. She smiled when she saw I'd recognized her. A smile that didn't reach her eyes. A smile that looked rehearsed in front of a mirror for too long. When I blinked, she had disappeared. The aisle was empty. A clerk passed by me with a restocking cart and looked at me curiously, probably wondering why I was paralyzed in the middle of the supermarket staring at nothing. The second time was in my office 3 days later. I arrived early in the morning, before the surrounding businesses opened, to review some documents in silence. When I opened the door, I saw a man sitting in the client chair, the chair where desperate mothers and anguished husbands sat when they came to tell me their tragedies. I recognized him before he turned around, just by the shape of his shoulders, by the black hair combed to one side. Pedro Santana, a 17-year-old teenager who disappeared in 2005 after leaving a birthday party. His parents hired me when the police abandoned the case. I spent 8 months looking for him without finding anything. His mother died 3 years later, not knowing what had happened to her son. And there he was, sitting in my office, the same 17 years old as always. He turned slowly and looked at me with eyes that didn't seem entirely human, eyes with too much depth, too much darkness, as if behind them lay an infinite abyss. He smiled with that same empty smile I had seen on Carmen, and then vanished into thin air like smoke dispersed by a breeze that didn't exist. The chair was still warm when I dared to touch it. The third time was in my own home, and that was the worst of all. I woke up at exactly 3 in the morning, the same time the reunited page became accessible, feeling someone watching me. It was that feeling you have when you know you aren't alone even if you can't see anyone. That animal certainty making the hair on your arms stand up and your heart race before your conscious mind can process what is happening. Opening my eyes, I saw figures standing around my bed. Not 1 or 2, but many. Maybe 5, maybe 10, maybe more. It was hard to count them because the edges of their bodies seemed to blur into the room's darkness, as if they weren't fully present on this plane of existence, as if they were projections of something existing elsewhere, in that space between what exists and what doesn't, that Elena had told me about, all motionless like wax statues in a museum of horrors, all looking at me with identical smiles on their ageless faces, smiles showing too many teeth, smiles conveying neither joy nor warmth but something colder, hungrier, more ancient than any human emotion. I recognized some of the faces surrounding me. Elena Martin with her dark hair falling over her shoulders exactly like in the photos from 15 years ago. Carmen Ruiz with her blue dress with white flowers looking freshly ironed despite the decades. Pedro Santana with his t-shirt of a band that no longer exists, and he probably never got to see in concert. And Marta Vasquez, the woman who had started all this, standing at the back of the group with eyes glowing in the dark like two embers about to go out. The others were faces from files I had reviewed over a 25-year career. Solved and unsolved cases, people found alive and people found dead and people who never appeared anywhere. All together in my room forming a perfect circle around my bed, watching me with that infinite patience of someone who knows time no longer means anything. One of the figures separated from the group and leaned toward me, bringing her face close to mine until I could feel her cold breath on my skin, breath smelling of damp cemetery earth and withered flowers in a forgotten vase. It was Elena, the first one to contact me, the one waiting 15 years for this moment. "It's time," she whispered in a voice seeming to come from very far and very near at the same time. "You've been searching too long. It's time to find." I tried to scream, but my voice wouldn't come out. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't respond. I could only watch as the figures came closer and closer, as their smiles widened until they seemed impossible, as their eyes glowed with a light not belonging to this world. Then I woke up. Or at least I think so. I'm no longer sure of the difference between being asleep and being awake, between what is real and what isn't. It was daytime. Sunlight entered through the window, drawing golden rectangles on my bedroom floor. I was alone. There was no one around my bed, no smiling figure, no missing person's face watching me from the shadows. But on my nightstand was something that wasn't there when I fell asleep. Something I hadn't put there, something that couldn't have arrived there in any rational or logical way. A photo printed on old paper, yellowed by time as if kept for decades in a forgotten drawer. The edges were slightly curled and the color had started to fade. But the image was perfectly clear, perfectly sharp, perfectly impossible. In the photo appeared me, standing in the middle of a group of people. People I recognized because I had spent years looking for them, because their faces haunted my dreams, because they represented all my accumulated failures throughout a career dedicated to finding what didn't want to be found. Missing persons. People who had been out of the world of the living for years, decades, and I was among them, smiling with the same empty expression they all had, with eyes glowing with that light not belonging to this world, with the relaxed posture of someone who has finally found his place. On the back of the photo was a date handwritten in a calligraphy I didn't recognize but looked old, shaky, as if written by someone who hadn't held a pen in a long time. Tomorrow's date. I've spent the rest of the day looking at that photo, studying my own face in it, trying to recognize myself in that man smiling among the missing. He doesn't look scared. He doesn't look sad. He looks at peace, as if he finally found the place where he should always have been. Maybe that's what awaits me. Maybe after 25 years looking for the lost, it's my turn to get lost. Maybe I always knew this job would lead me somewhere I couldn't return from. Tomorrow I'll know if the photo tells the truth. And a part of me, a part scaring me more than all the smiling figures put together, is wishing it so. My name is Rodrigo. I'm 40 years old and I haven't slept in a week because I know exactly how I'm going to die. I've been working as an IT guy at an insurance company for 15 years. It's a stable job, well paid, and absolutely boring. I spend 8 hours a day fixing problems people could solve if they just read the manuals, updating systems nobody understands, and sitting in meetings where I pretend to care about the company's future. My real life begins when I get home. For as long as I can remember, I've been fascinated by the hidden side of the internet. I'm not talking about illegal content or anything shady, but those forgotten corners where people share things you wouldn't find on any normal search engine. Abandoned forums from the 90s that are still running without anyone knowing why. Text files with stories no one remembers writing. Old programs that do things their creators never intended. I've been exploring these places for over 20 years, collecting digital curiosities like someone collecting stamps or ancient coins. 3 weeks ago, I found a forum I had never seen before. It had no name, just an IP address someone had shared on another board I frequent. The page was basic, White text on a black background, no images or decorations. Just a list of links to compressed files with names that were strings of seemingly meaningless numbers. What caught my attention was the forum's description, a single sentence at the top of the page. "What you are looking for has been looking for you." I thought it was pretentious nonsense, the kind of cryptic tagline admins of these sites use to make themselves feel important. But something about it made me stay, explore the links, try to understand what this place was. The files had no descriptions, just the numeric name and the file size. Some were barely a few kilobytes, others were several gigabytes. There were no comments, no visible users, no way to know who was uploading this stuff or why. I downloaded one of the small files out of curiosity. It was a text document with a list of dates. Nothing else. Dates from 1987 to 2042. I didn't understand what it meant, but I saved it in a folder with other oddities I had compiled over the years. Over the next few days, I returned to the forum several times and downloaded more files. Most were incomprehensible, snippets of code in languages I didn't recognize, corrupt images that wouldn't open correctly, audio files with static and noises that could be voices or could be interference. Nothing particularly interesting. Until I downloaded the file that changed everything. It was one of the largest, almost 10 gigabytes compressed. It took 2 hours to download, and when I unzipped it, I found a folder with hundreds of video files. The file names were dates, written in year-month-day format, followed by an exact time down to the second. I opened one of the videos at random. The image was low quality, grainy, like it was recorded with an old camera, or in very low light. It showed a room that looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't quite place. Nothing special was happening. Just an empty room filmed from a high angle, probably from a corner of the ceiling. I opened another video, another room, another angle, the same image quality. This time there was someone in the room, a blurry figure moving from side to side doing something I couldn't make out. I opened a third video and my heart stopped in my chest. It was my living room. My sofa with the gray cover I bought at a thrift store because it was cheap and comfortable. My 42-inch TV that has needed an upgrade for years. My IKEA bookshelf with books I never read because I always say I don't have time. And plants I always forget to water because I don't actually like plants. But someone once told me they brought life to a space. My living room filmed from a high angle, from the corner where the ceiling meets the wall, from a spot where there is no camera because I have never put a camera in my house. Because I've never had a reason to record myself doing the mundane and pathetic things I do when I think no one is watching. And in the video, there I was. I saw myself sitting on the sofa watching TV like any other night of my life. I was wearing the blue t-shirt I wear around the house, the one with a hole in the right shoulder that I always say I'm going to throw away but never do, because it's the most comfortable shirt I own. I had a beer in my left hand and my feet on the coffee table, exactly how I sit every night after dinner. Exactly how I was sitting that very night before finding the files. I checked the file date with my heart beating so hard I could feel it in my ears. It was from 3 days ago. I tried to remember what I had done that night and I couldn't. All my nights are the same. I get home, eat something quick, sit on the sofa to watch whatever is on, drink 1 or 2 beers and go to sleep. It could have been any night in the last 10 years, but someone had recorded that night. Someone had put a camera in my living room without me knowing and had recorded me watching TV like an idiot. The panic I felt was immediate and visceral, a wave of terror rising from my stomach to my throat, leaving me breathless for several seconds. I got up from the computer so fast I knocked over the chair and ran through the house looking for hidden cameras with the desperation of a cornered animal. I checked every corner of every room, every nook where a recording device could hide. I checked every shelf, moving books and decorative objects I had accumulated for years without really knowing why. I checked every object that could hide something. The alarm clock on the nightstand, the router in the living room, the smoke detectors on the ceiling, lamps, outlets. Everything I had ever read could contain a spy camera. I took apart lamps with a screwdriver I barely knew how to use. I moved furniture I hadn't moved since I moved in. I stuck my fingers into cracks and holes looking for wires, looking for lenses, looking for anything that could explain how someone could be recording me. I found nothing. Not a camera, not a microphone, not a single device I hadn't put there myself. I went back to the computer and started checking the video files one by one, looking for a pattern. some clue as to who was spying on me and how. The videos spanned weeks. There were recordings of my living room, my kitchen, my bedroom, the hallway. Every corner of my house filmed from impossible angles, from places where there was nothing that could hold a camera. I saw myself sleeping, eating, showering, talking on the phone, doing all the mundane and pathetic things I do when I think no one is watching. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst wasn't knowing that someone had been watching me for weeks, filming every intimate moment of my life without my knowledge or consent. The worst was that some of the files had future dates. At first I thought it was a mistake, that whoever uploaded the videos had messed up naming them, some typo in the year, some confusion with the date format. Things like that happen constantly, especially with files shared on underground forums where no one follows any standard. But when I opened one of those files dated 2 days from now, I saw something that froze the blood in my veins and made me forget any rational explanation my mind could have constructed. It was my living room again. The same room I had seen in dozens of videos, with the same furniture, the same walls, the same light coming through the window at certain times of the day. But I wasn't sitting on the sofa watching TV like in the other videos. I wasn't reading or eating or doing any of the mundane things that made up my daily existence. I was lying on the floor face down, motionless, arms extended in an unnatural position, as if I had suddenly collapsed while walking somewhere. And under my body, spreading slowly across the parquet floor that cost so much money when I bought the apartment, was a dark pool that could only be one thing. The video lasted 47 minutes. For 47 minutes, absolutely nothing happened. Just my body lying on the floor, not moving a millimeter, while the pool grew larger very slowly. Too slowly to be water or any other innocent liquid, with that characteristic viscosity only blood has when it starts to coagulate. I closed the video with hands trembling so much I could barely control the mouse. The cursor jumped across the screen as if it had a life of its own, reflecting the tremor shaking my whole body from fingers to shoulders. I spent the rest of the night checking the remaining future dated files. There were dozens of them, all showing the same thing from different angles. My body lying in different parts of my house, always motionless, always surrounded by that dark pool that could only be one thing. The file dates varied. Some were dated 2 days from now, others a week from now, others a month from now. But they all showed the same final result: me dead in my own house. As if someone were documenting all the possible ways I could die, all the variants of my end, all the ways my life could terminate within the walls of my own home. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the sofa with all the lights on, a kitchen knife in my hand that would have been useless against whatever was watching me, staring at the corners of the ceiling where the cameras I couldn't find were supposed to be. Every shadow seemed suspicious. Every creak of the wood made me jump. Every noise in the building, those pipes that always clank at 3 in the morning, seemed like an imminent threat, the prelude to something terrible about to happen. But nothing happened. The hours dragged on with the slowness of a night of total insomnia. Dawn arrived with insulting normalcy. Birds sang as if the world hadn't turned into a nightmare. The sun rose as if I didn't have proof of my own death on my computer. And I was still alive, sitting on the same sofa where I had seen myself dead in a dozen different videos, wondering how much time would pass until reality caught up with what the files showed. I called in sick to work. I couldn't go to the office and pretend everything was fine, while on my computer there was proof of my own death filmed from angles that defied the laws of physics. I dedicated the day to investigating the origin of the files. I tried to trace the forum's IP address, but it was impossible. Every tool I used gave me a different result, as if the page existed in several places at the same time or nowhere at all. I searched for information on other users who might have downloaded files from that site but found nothing. It was as if the forum existed only for me. I called a friend who works in cybersecurity, a guy I met years ago at a hacker convention who knows more about the actual workings of the internet than anyone I've ever met. I told him a partial version of the story, omitting the most disturbing details, and asked him to help me trace the forum's origin. He called me that same night with a strange tone in his voice. He told me he had found something but wasn't sure what it meant. The forum existed, that was clear, but it didn't exist on any known server. It wasn't hosted on any physical machine that could be located. It was as if the page were floating somewhere in the data, occupying a space that technically shouldn't exist. I asked him if that was possible, and he stayed silent for so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, he told me no, it wasn't possible, that nothing he had found made sense according to everything he knew about how the internet worked. He advised me to delete the files, format the hard drive, and forget I had ever found that site. I didn't follow his advice. At night I went back to review the videos, looking for something I might have missed, some detail explaining how recordings of my house could exist from angles defying any logic. And then I realized something I hadn't noticed before. In one of the past videos, one recorded 2 weeks ago according to the file date, I appeared doing something I remembered perfectly. It was the night I stayed up late working on a personal project, a program I had been developing for months in my free time. In the video, I was seen sitting at the computer, typing, looking at the screen with the concentration of someone solving a complicated problem. I remembered that night because it was when I finally got the program to work. I remembered the exact time I succeeded, because I looked at the clock and thought it was too late to celebrate with a beer. I checked the video timestamp. It matched my memory exactly to the second. That meant the videos from the past were real, that they really showed things that had happened exactly when they said they had happened, which meant the videos from the future could also be real. The following days were a hell of paranoia and terror. I changed all the locks on my house, installed an alarm system with motion sensors in every room, bought my own security cameras to watch every corner. If someone was recording me, I wanted to know who it was and how they were doing it. I spent almost 2,000 euros on surveillance equipment, night vision cameras, recorders that stored everything in the cloud, frequency detectors that could supposedly locate hidden recording devices. I spent an entire weekend installing everything, sweeping every inch of my house with the frequency detector, looking for anything emitting a signal, anything that could explain the videos. I found nothing. The cameras I installed captured nothing strange. No intruders, no shadows, no inexplicable movements, nothing explaining how recordings of my house could exist from angles where I hadn't placed any device. My own cameras showed me exactly what I expected to see. An empty house when I wasn't there. A house with an increasingly paranoid man when I was. I started sleeping poorly. I woke up every few hours with the feeling someone was watching me, with that irrational certainty there were eyes in the darkness following my every move. I reviewed my camera recordings over and over, looking for something I might have missed. Some shadow in a corner, some barely perceptible movement. But every night when I returned to the forum, there were new files. Files dated from the previous day showing exactly what I had done, recorded from those impossible angles my own cameras couldn't capture. My cameras showed one version of reality. The forum files showed another, filmed from a perspective not belonging to this world. It was as if there were a layer of reality on top of mine. A version of my house where invisible cameras existed filming every moment of my existence for a spectator I couldn't see or comprehend. And the files from the future were still there, updating, changing in ways that made me question everything I thought I knew about the nature of time and reality. That was the most disturbing part. The videos of my death weren't fixed. Every day that passed, the dates changed, the angles changed, the details changed. Sometimes I appeared dead in the living room, collapsed by the sofa as if I'd had a heart attack while watching TV. Other times I was in the kitchen, fallen by the counter with a knife near my hand that could mean an accident or something worse. Other times I was in the bedroom, lying in bed with my eyes closed as if I had simply fallen asleep forever. Sometimes the pool of blood was large, spreading across the floor like a liquid shadow. Other times it was barely a dark stain under my head. Sometimes I was face down and couldn't see my face. Other times I was face up with eyes open looking directly at the camera that didn't exist, with an expression I couldn't interpret. I started keeping a log of the changes. Every night I noted the details of the future videos, the date, the location, the body position, the size of the pool. I looked for a pattern, a logic, something allowing me to predict or avoid what they showed, but there was no pattern. The changes seemed random, as if my death were an inevitable event. But the details were still to be decided, as if something were testing different options to see which fit best. A week after discovering the files, I found a different video. It was dated for the next day and didn't show my corpse. It didn't show my body lying on the floor surrounded by blood. It didn't show any of the death variants I had seen repeated in dozens of different files. It showed something worse. In the video, I appeared sitting at the computer, in the same position I was in at that moment while watching it. The same chair, the same desk lamp, lighting my face from the same angle. But the me in the video wasn't looking at the screen with an expression of horror like I must have had at that moment. He wasn't trembling or sweating or showing any sign of fear. He was smiling, a wide, relaxed smile, like the smile of someone who has discovered a wonderful secret and can't contain the joy. A smile I didn't recognize on my own face, because I didn't remember the last time I had smiled like that, if I ever had. And while smiling, the me in the video turned slowly toward the camera, toward that impossible point on the ceiling where there was nothing, where there had never been anything, and raised a hand to wave. As if he knew I was watching from the past, as if he were greeting me across time, from a future that hadn't arrived yet, but somehow already existed somewhere. I looked away from the monitor by instinct and looked toward the corner of the ceiling appearing in the video, expecting to see something, expecting to find an explanation my mind could accept. There was nothing, just the junction of two white-painted walls and a small water stain I had been promising myself to fix for years, which now seemed to look back at me like an eyelidless eye. When I looked back at the screen, the video had changed. Now it showed my empty room, only it wasn't entirely empty. In the center of the frame, written on the wall with what looked like dried blood, was a message. It said, "We are almost there." I closed the computer so hard I thought I broke the screen. I got up from the chair and backed away until I hit the wall, unable to take my eyes off the closed laptop, as if at any moment it would open by itself and show me something worse. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my temples, my wrists, my neck. Every beat was a reminder that I was still alive, that the date appearing in the videos hadn't arrived yet, that I still had time to escape whatever was watching me. But escape where? And from what? From something that could record me from angles that didn't exist. From something that knew what was going to happen before it happened. From something that had been documenting every moment of my life for weeks as if I were an animal in an invisible zoo. I don't know how long I stayed like that, paralyzed with terror, breathing so fast I started to get dizzy. Sweat ran down my forehead, and my hands were so cold they seemed to belong to someone else. When I finally regained control of my body, I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed the computer and threw it out the window. I watched it fall 3 stories until it crashed against the asphalt of the interior courtyard, breaking into pieces that scattered across the ground like the remains of roadkill. The screen separated from the keyboard. Keys flew in all directions. The hard drive lay exposed among the remains of plastic and shattered circuits. I stared at the wreckage for a long time, leaning on the windowsill, waiting to feel relief, waiting for the destruction of the device to mean the end of that nightmare. If the computer was the gateway to those files, destroying the computer should close that door forever. But when I turned around to go back to the living room, I saw something that made me fall to my knees. On the hallway wall, written with something that looked like ash or black dust, was a message that wasn't there 10 minutes ago. It said, "The file is you." Below the message was a date, today's date. And below the date, a time, 3:47 in the morning. I looked at the kitchen clock. It was 3:45. I heard a noise behind me, a soft creak like a footstep on the old parquet of my house. And I knew without needing to turn around that the 2 minutes I had left weren't going to be enough to escape what had been watching me for weeks from angles that shouldn't exist. The last thing I saw before the lights went out was my own reflection in the window glass. But the reflection wasn't exactly me. The reflection was smiling. The same smile I had seen in the video from the future that was now the present. The same smile of someone who has discovered a wonderful secret and can't contain the joy. The same smile I didn't recognize on my own face because it had never been mine. Now I understand the videos were never recordings of what was going to happen. They were instructions for what I was going to do. And as I write this with the little strength I have left, I can feel the smile forming on my lips even though I don't want to smile. I can feel my hands moving toward places I don't want them to go. I can feel how something that isn't me takes control of my body piece by piece. What watched me from impossible angles wasn't outside my house. It was waiting inside me, waiting for the right moment to wake up. And now that it has woken up, I know exactly what I'm going to do tonight. Soon, I will be the file someone else finds. I haven't slept in 72 hours, and I no longer know if what I see on the screen is real or if my mind has started inventing things. My name is Adrian, I'm 24 years old, and I am trapped in a game I cannot exit. I've always loved video games. Since I was a kid and my parents gave me my first console, I've spent thousands of hours in front of screens killing monsters, solving puzzles, and exploring worlds that don't exist. For me, games were never a waste of time, but a way to escape a reality I didn't like very much. In high school, I was the weird kid. The one who didn't fit into any group. The one who preferred staying home on a Friday night leveling up rather than drinking warm beer in a park with people he didn't actually care about. Now I work the night shift at a delivery warehouse, unloading boxes from trucks for 8 hours while thinking about what I'm going to play when I get home. It's not my dream job, but it pays the rent for the apartment I share with 2 other guys I barely see because our schedules never match. They sleep when I work, and they work when I sleep. Sometimes I go days without speaking to another human being, other than the warehouse foreman telling me to hurry up. 3 weeks ago, I found the game. I was browsing gaming forums looking for something new to try. I had been bored for months with the titles hitting the market. All the same, all predictable, all designed to drain your wallet with microtransactions and battle passes. I was looking for something different, something that would make me feel what I felt as a child when I discovered a game for the first time and the whole world disappeared around me. Someone had posted a link in a thread discussing abandonware. They said they had found something strange, something that didn't appear on any search engine, something that seemed custom-made for them. They didn't give many details, just the link and one sentence. If you find it, it's because it was looking for you. The link led to a nameless page, just a black background and a download button. No description, no screenshots, no system requirements, just an executable file. Barely 200 megabytes. I should have been suspicious. I should have thought it could be a virus, ransomware, anything designed to destroy my computer or steal my data. But something about that page pulled me in a way I couldn't explain. I felt I had to download it, that the game was waiting for me, that everything I had done up to that moment had led me to find that link on that forum at that hour of the morning. I clicked download. The installation took only seconds. When it finished, a new icon appeared on my desktop. A symbol I didn't recognize, something between an eye and a spiral that seemed to move if you looked at it too long. I double-clicked. The screen went black for a few seconds, and then the game title appeared in white letters that flickered as if they were about to burn out. The Threshold. There was no options menu, no splash screen, nothing you would expect to find in a normal video game. Just the title, and below it, a single option. Begin. I clicked. The game started without any intro, cinematic, or explanation of what I had to do. I found myself controlling a character in first-person view in the middle of a long, dark hallway. The graphics were strange, neither realistic nor pixelated, something in between that was hard to process, as if the game couldn't quite decide what it wanted to look like. I moved down the hallway, not knowing what I was looking for. The walls were lined with closed doors, all identical, all with a number painted in red that increased as I advanced. I tried opening a few, but none budged. I could only keep moving forward, venturing deeper and deeper into that place that seemed to have no end. After what felt like hours of walking, I found a different door. It was larger than the others, a darker color, and had no number. When I approached, it opened on its own with a creak that sounded too real to be a sound effect. On the other side was a room I recognized instantly. It was my room. My bed, my desk, my closet with the door that never closes right. My poster of a movie I saw years ago and never bothered to take down. Everything exactly the same as reality, rendered with a level of detail that made no sense for a 200 megabyte game. In the center of the room was a glowing object, the kind of thing you know you have to pick up in any game. I walked over and grabbed it. It was a key. As soon as it was in my inventory, a message appeared on the screen. First trial completed. Find the door. I left the room and went back to the hallway. Now all the doors were different. Some glowed with a faint light, others seemed darker than before, and one, just one among hundreds, had a gold lock. It took me 20 minutes to find it. When I used the key, it opened, and on the other side I found another room with another glowing object. That's how it all started. The first few hours were like any other game. Collecting items, finding doors, advancing through a labyrinth that seemed to change every time I retraced my steps. The hallways twisted in ways that defied spatial logic, turning left 3 times in a row only to end up exactly where I started, or climbing stairs that led to floors located below where I had begun. It was addictive in a way I hadn't experienced in years. That feeling of needing to know what's next, of not being able to stop until completing one more trial, one more level, one more step. Every door I opened gave me a small hit of satisfaction. Every object I found made me want to search for the next. Every new hallway was a promise of something bigger waiting for me at the end. The game had no music, only sound effects that seemed designed to get under your skin. The echo of my footsteps in empty corridors, the creak of doors opening, a constant whisper that could be the wind or could be voices speaking in a language I didn't recognize. Sometimes I heard other footsteps behind me, but when I turned around, there was nothing. I played all night without realizing it. When I finally looked away from the screen, the sun was coming through the window, and I had been sitting at the computer for 12 hours straight. I was hungry, thirsty, sleepy, but above all, I just wanted to keep playing. My eyes burned from the effort of not blinking, my fingers were cramped over the keyboard, and my back protested the hours without moving from the chair. I went to work that night like a zombie, thinking only of getting back home and turning on the computer. My coworkers at the warehouse asked if I was okay, and I told them yes, though it was a lie. I couldn't think of anything other than the game, the doors I still had to open, the secrets that infinite labyrinth was hiding. The second night I played, things started to change. The rooms I found behind the doors were no longer generic. They were places I recognized. My parents' house where I grew up, the high school where I spent 4 years trying to be invisible, my ex-girlfriend's apartment where I lived for 6 months before she kicked me out, all reproduced with impossible detail, with objects only I could know, with details that didn't appear in any photo or shared memory. And the trial started becoming personal. In the room replicating my childhood home, I had to find a hidden object. It was the teddy bear I lost when I was 7, the one I cried over for weeks until my parents bought me another one that was never the same. In the game, it was exactly where I always suspected it would be, behind the living room radiator, in a gap I couldn't reach as a child. The next day I went to visit my parents for the first time in months. I don't know why I did it. I felt I needed to check something. I told them I was in the neighborhood, that I had the day off, that I wanted to see them. My mother was so happy I felt guilty for all the times I had ignored her calls, for all the Sundays I had canceled saying I had plans, when really I just wanted to stay home gaming. While my mother made coffee and my father asked about the job I no longer had, I walked over to the living room radiator, trying to look casual, the same radiator that had been there for as long as I could remember, the same gap behind it that seemed like a mysterious cave to me as a kid. I reached my hand into the gap. My fingers brushed against something soft and dusty, something that shouldn't have been there after almost 20 years, something cleaning and renovations should have found decades ago. It was there. The teddy bear, dirty and flattened, color faded, and one eye hanging by a thread, was exactly where the game had shown me. I pulled it out with trembling hands and stared at it, unable to believe what I was seeing. My mother walked into the living room with the coffee mugs and froze when she saw what I was holding. "That's the bear you lost when you were little," she said, her voice shaking. "How is it possible it was there all this time?" I didn't know what to answer. I couldn't tell her a video game showed me where to find it. I couldn't explain what was happening because I didn't understand it myself. The cold I felt in that moment wasn't normal. It wasn't the cold of fear or surprise. It was something deeper, as if my body knew something my mind hadn't yet processed, as if a part of me understood that this was only the beginning. I didn't go to work that night. I called in sick and sat in front of the computer to keep playing. The trials became harder. It was no longer enough to find objects and open doors. Now the game asked me to make decisions, to choose between options I didn't understand, to sacrifice items from my inventory that had taken hours to acquire. And then the real-world trials began. The first one appeared after completing an especially long level. A message on the screen said, "External trial. Leave your house. Walk to the street corner. Pick up what you find." I thought it was a joke, some kind of meta-humor from the developer. But something pushed me to do it. It was 4 in the morning, The street was deserted, and when I reached the corner, I found an envelope on the ground. Inside was a note with a single word, "Continue." I ran back home and turned on the computer. The game had advanced on its own. There was a new unlocked zone, a new labyrinth to explore, new doors to open. Since then, the external trials became more frequent. The game asked me to do things in the real world to advance. Small things at first. Go to a specific part of the city I had never visited and photograph a specific graffiti tag on a specific wall. Pick up a rock from a park and leave it on the windowsill of an abandoned building. Write a word on the bathroom mirror of a coffee shop I had never entered. Every time I completed an external trial, the game unlocked a little more. New zones, new doors, new secrets waiting to be discovered. It was as if the real world had become an extension of the digital labyrinth, as if every street and every building were just more hallways to explore. But the trials escalated. It asked me to send a message to Sophia, my ex-girlfriend, the one who had kicked me out of her apartment 2 years ago after discovering I had lied to her about something I prefer not to remember. The message the game forced me to send was strange, cryptic, a series of words that made no sense together, but that she would understand somehow. She didn't reply, but the next day I saw she had blocked me on all social media. It asked me to quit my job, not to resign formally, but to simply stop going, to ignore the foreman's calls, to act as if that job had never existed. I did it. 3 days later, I got a message saying I was fired. I felt nothing. It asked me to stop eating for an entire day. 24 hours without a bite, drinking nothing but water. It asked me to stay awake for 48 hours straight. It asked me to go out barefoot at 4 in the morning and walk until my feet bled, and I obeyed. I can't explain why. Every time I thought about disobeying, about ignoring the trial and playing without doing what it asked, something stopped me. A physical sensation, like a pressure in my chest that wouldn't let me breathe, like a weight on my shoulders pushing me down, like an invisible hand squeezing my heart until I did what the game commanded. Only when I obeyed did the pressure vanish, allowing me to breathe normally again. My roommates started to worry. They said I was thinner, paler, that I had dark circles from lack of sleep and smelled like I hadn't showered in days. I told them I was fine, that I was just going through a rough patch. I couldn't tell them the truth because even I didn't understand it. I tried to stop playing once. It was after the cutting trial. When I looked at the palm of my hand and saw blood dripping onto the keyboard, something broke inside me. A part of my brain that had been asleep since I started playing woke up suddenly and screamed that this wasn't right, that no game should ask you to hurt yourself, that I had crossed a line I shouldn't have crossed. I closed the program in a fury, feeling my heartbeat so hard I could hear it in my ears. I uninstalled the game using every method I knew, deleted the installation folder, emptied the recycling bin, ran a cleaning program to wipe any trace left on the hard drive. I even formatted a partition where I thought a file might have hidden. When I finished, I felt free for the first time in weeks. I showered, ate something, called my mom to tell her I was okay, even though it was a lie. I went to bed determined to start over, to go back to being the person I was before finding that link. I slept for 12 hours straight, but when I woke up, the game was open on my computer. The screen glowed in the darkness of my room, showing the labyrinth exactly where I had left it, as if I had never closed it, as if the hours of deleting and cleaning had meant nothing. Not only that, the icon had appeared on my phone, on the home screen next to the apps I use every day. It was on the old tablet I had kept in a drawer for months, turned on by itself in the middle of the night, showing the same labyrinth. It even appeared on the work computer when I went to return the warehouse keys after getting fired for no showing. The game had followed me. The game was everywhere. The game wasn't going to let me leave. And there was a new message on the screen. You cannot quit. You can only advance. That was the first time I felt real fear. Not movie fear or nightmare fear, but a deep ancient terror telling me I had crossed a line I shouldn't have crossed. That I had opened a door I couldn't close again. The trials continued. Stranger, harder, more painful. The game asked me to cut my palm and let 3 drops of blood fall onto the keyboard. I did it without thinking. With a kitchen knife I barely felt piercing my skin. The blood fell onto the keys and was absorbed as if the plastic were a thirsty sponge. It asked me to burn every photo I had of my family. I took them out of the albums my mother had given me when I left home. Photos of my childhood, birthdays, vacations at the beach that were the only happy memories I had of that time. I burned them one by one in the bathroom sink, watching the faces of my young parents twist and blacken until they disappeared. It asked me to write a goodbye letter. Not to send it, just to write it. To put into words everything I would say if I decided not to go on. It was the hardest trial yet because while writing, I realized I had nothing to say. That there was no one who would really miss me. That my life had become so empty, the letter barely took up half a page. It asked me to go out to the street at 3 in the morning and walk until I found someone, anyone awake at that hour, and say a specific phrase to them. The streets were deserted, and I walked for almost an hour before finding a man sitting on a park bench, staring into the void with eyes I recognized because they were identical to mine when I looked in the mirror. The phrase was, "I am almost ready." The stranger I said it to looked at me with an expression I will never forget. It wasn't fear or confusion. It was recognition. As if he knew exactly what those words meant. As if he had played the game too. When I got back home, a new level was unlocked. This time, the labyrinth was different from anything I had seen before. The walls were covered in mirrors from floor to ceiling. Mirrors reflecting light from a source I couldn't identify. Mirrors multiplying my character to infinity in all directions. And in every reflection, I saw something that froze my blood. The reflections didn't move when I moved. While my character advanced down the hallway, the copies in the mirrors stood still, watching me, following me with eyes that shouldn't be able to move independently. Some smiled with a smile I wasn't making, a smile too wide, showing too many teeth. Others cried black tears that left tracks on their digital cheeks. Others simply watched me with an empty expression that was more disturbing than any grimace of terror. As I advanced, the reflections started doing things. One raised a hand and waved at me. Another put a finger to its lips, asking for silence. A third pointed forward, signaling me to keep going, not to stop, to continue to the end of the hallway where something waited for me. At the end of the labyrinth was a door larger than all the others. A door that seemed made of something that wasn't wood or metal, or any material I knew. Something that seemed alive, breathing with a slow and steady rhythm, pulsating like a sick heart. The surface was covered in veins beating under a skin that shouldn't exist in any computer code. When I touched it, the game paused and a message appeared. Final trial. To open this door, you must bring someone else. Below were detailed instructions. I had to get another person to download the game. I had to share the link, send it to someone, get them to click and start playing. Only then could I complete the last level and discover what was on the other side of that door. I stared at the screen for hours, not knowing what to do. I thought of all the people I could send it to. Friends I hadn't seen in years, relatives I barely spoke to, internet acquaintances I exchanged messages with occasionally. Any of them could be my victim, my sacrifice, the person who would take my place in this digital hell. But I couldn't do it. For the first time since I started playing, I felt I regained some control. A spark of the person I was before finding that link on that forum at 3 in the morning. Someone who wouldn't hurt others to save himself. I typed a message refusing to complete the trial. The game's response was immediate. The screen filled with images I recognized as my memories. Moments of my life I hadn't shared with anyone. Intimate scenes that only existed in my memory. I saw myself as a child crying in my room. I saw myself as a teenager thinking things I never told anyone. I saw myself a few weeks ago, sitting at this very desk, with empty eyes and hands moving on their own over the keyboard. And then I saw something that hadn't happened yet. I saw myself standing in the middle of a dark room. It wasn't any place I knew, any place I could identify. But there were other people there, dozens of them, all standing in a circle, all looking toward a center I couldn't see. They all had the same smile as my reflections in the mirror maze. The message that appeared next said, "This is what is on the other side of the door. This is what you will be when you finish. This is what we all are now." I closed the game. I turned off the computer. I ripped the power cord from the wall, but I can feel it still there, waiting. Every time I close my eyes, I see the labyrinth. Every time there is silence, I hear the sound of doors opening. Every time I look at my phone, the game icon flickers, even if I delete it over and over. And the worst part is that a part of me wants to play again. A part of me wants to know what is on the other side of that door. A part of me is thinking about who I could send the link to. I've been resisting for 3 days. 3 days without sleep, barely eating, not looking away from the powered-off computer because I know as soon as I turn it on, I'll start again. But every hour that passes, resistance becomes harder. Every hour I feel the pressure in my chest stronger, the need to return to the labyrinth more intense, the curiosity to know what is behind that door more impossible to ignore. And a part of me is already thinking about who I could send the link to. The icon on my phone is glowing brighter every time. The first message arrived at 3 in the morning, when I'd been trying to sleep for hours without success. My name is Daniel. I'm 37 years old. And for the last 2 weeks, I've been talking to versions of myself that shouldn't exist. I've been working as an accountant at a construction company for 11 years. It's the kind of job I never dreamed of having, but pays the bills and allows me to live alone in a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. I don't complain. Some people have it much worse. That's what I tell myself every morning when the alarm goes off, and I have to drag myself out of bed to spend another day checking numbers that mean nothing to anyone except those taking the profits. My life is routine to the point of boredom. I get up at 7, eat the same breakfast as always, take the subway at 8, arrive at the office at 9, eat a sandwich at my desk at 2, leave at 6, go home, have something for dinner that can be made in the microwave, watch series until I fall asleep on the sofa. On weekends, I sometimes meet up with a high school friend who still puts up with me, but less and less because we have nothing to talk about anymore. Our lives drifted apart years ago, and now we are only bound by the inertia of a friendship neither knows how to end. I haven't had a partner for 4 years. My last relationship ended when she realized I wasn't going to change, that I would always be this gray guy who prefers staying home to going out, who would never have ambitions beyond making ends meet and not dying alone. She left without drama, without screaming, without arguments. One day she simply packed her bags and told me she deserved better. She was right. That is my life. That is all I am. Until the message arrived. My phone vibrated on the nightstand with the characteristic sound of a WhatsApp notification. I thought it would be spam, one of those groups you get added to without permission to sell you things. But when I looked at the screen, I saw something that made no sense. I had been added to a group called the Daniels. The group icon was a photo of me. Not a photo I had uploaded anywhere, but a photo of myself that seemed taken years ago, perhaps when I was 20-something, with longer hair and an expression I no longer recognized on my face. Inside the group were 12 participants. They all had my name. They all had profile pictures showing my face, but with subtle differences I struggled to identify at first. One had a beard, another wore glasses I have never worn. Another had a scar on his left eyebrow I don't have. The first message in the group was from one of them, the one with the beard. "We finally found you. Welcome, Daniel." I thought it was a joke. Some friend with too much free time who had set up a group with edited photos to scare me. Or maybe an elaborate scam. One of those starting with something weird to grab your attention and ending by asking for money or bank details. I've seen everything in the years I've been using the internet, and it would take something very convincing to fool me. I typed asking who he was and what he wanted, with the dry and suspicious tone of someone knowing he's going to block all participants as soon as he confirms it's spam. The reply came almost instantly, but not from the one with the beard. From another one whose profile picture showed myself but thinner, with deeper circles under the eyes and something in the gaze that made me look away from the screen. It was like looking in a mirror reflecting not what I am, but what I could have been if things had gone worse. "It's not a joke, we are you. Versions of you from other places. We've been looking for you for weeks, we need your help." I closed WhatsApp and left the phone on the nightstand. I stared at the ceiling for a long time, convincing myself it was a dream, that I had fallen asleep without realizing, and my mind was creating absurd nightmares to entertain itself. But I didn't wake up because I wasn't asleep. The phone vibrated again, and again, and again. When I looked at it again, there were dozens of messages in the group, all from different versions of myself, all explaining who they were and where they came from. I am Daniel from a reality where I never dropped out of college. Here I am, a math teacher at a high school. I am Daniel from a timeline where I accepted that job abroad. I've lived in Canada for 8 years. I am Daniel from a world where mom didn't die when we were 15. Here she is, still alive. That last message hit me like a punch to the stomach. My mother died of cancer when I was 15. It was the worst thing that ever happened to me. The moment splitting my existence into a before and after. The reason I never managed to be fully happy, because there is always a part of me remaining that teenager who watched the person he loved most fade away little by little in a hospital bed. I typed with trembling fingers, "How do you know about my mother?" The reply was immediate. "I know because she is my mother too. She was my mother. In all realities, she was our mother. But in some she died, and in others she didn't. I got lucky. You didn't." I spent the rest of the night reading the group messages, unable to pull myself away from the phone. The different versions of myself told their lives, their decisions, the paths they had taken that I didn't take. There was one who had married Clara, my first high school love, the girl who broke my heart when she left me for another guy in senior year. There was another who had started his own company and was now rich. There was one in prison for something he didn't want to explain. There was one who had a car accident at 25 and was now in a wheelchair. We were all Daniel. We had all started at the same point, born from the same egg and sperm, raised by the same parents in the same house. But at some point our lives had branched off, taking different paths, making us distinct people even though we shared the same face and name. When dawn broke, my eyes were red from not sleeping and my head full of questions I didn't know how to formulate. I typed, "Why have you looked for me? What do you want from me?" The one with the beard replied, "There is something wrong in all realities. Something affecting all Daniels. And we believe you are the origin." I didn't understand what he meant. I asked him what that meant about me being the origin. The explanation came in fragments, messages from different versions of myself slowly composing an image I didn't want to see. In all realities, Daniel dies at 38, in all without exception. Doesn't matter what decisions we made, doesn't matter if we are rich or poor, happy or miserable. We all die at 38. You turn 38 in 3 months. And we believe if you die, the original, all the others will die too. I stared at the screen, unable to process what I was reading. 38 years, 3 months, death. I typed that was impossible, that they couldn't know when anyone was going to die, that all this was madness making no sense. The replies came cascading. One of us died 2 weeks ago. He was 38 years and 3 days old. Massive heart attack. Another died a month ago. Traffic accident. 38 years exactly. We've tracked deaths in dozens of realities. The pattern is always the same. 38 years. Never more, never less. And when we look back in the chain of realities, they all converge on you. You are the original Daniel, the first, the one who somehow generated all branches. If you die, the main timeline disappears, and all of us with it. I called in sick to work. I couldn't go to the office and pretend everything was normal, while on my phone 12 versions of myself explained I had 3 months left to live, and my death would drag countless versions of me into non-existence. I spent the next few days glued to the WhatsApp group, talking to the other Daniels, trying to understand what was happening, and if there was any way to avoid it. I learned things about them making me question every decision I had made in my life. The Daniel who married Clara told me they were happy. They had 2 children, a 10-year-old girl and a 7-year-old boy. They lived in a house with a garden in a town near the coast. He told me Clara was still the most beautiful woman he had ever met, that every morning he woke up beside her, unable to believe how lucky he was. He sent me a photo of his family on the beach, the 4 smiling at the camera with the sea in the background, and I felt a pang of pain so intense I had to look away. That could have been my life if I had fought for it, if I hadn't given up when she left me, if I had the courage to tell her how I felt, instead of staying silent watching her walk away with someone else. The Daniel living in Canada told me he had accepted that job I rejected out of fear of leaving my comfort zone. The company that offered me the position 10 years ago, the one wanting to send me to Toronto to open a branch. The opportunity I let slip because I was afraid of flying, afraid of not speaking English well, afraid of everything starting from scratch in a country where I knew no one meant. He didn't have that fear, or had it but ignored it, and now earned triple what I did. Lived in a house with a garden and a 2-car garage. had real friends instead of acquaintances who barely tolerated him. He sent me photos of his life in Canada, of snowy mountains and crystal clear lakes, and I realized everything I had sacrificed to stay in my little bubble of mediocrity. The Daniel whose mother was still alive told me things tearing me apart inside. He told me she was proud of him, that she called him every Sunday to ask how he was, that she had been at his wedding and cried with happiness, seeing him arm in arm with his wife. He told me she had taken care of him when he had the flu last winter, that she had made him the chicken soup only she knew how to make, that she still scolded him for not dressing warmly enough even though he was almost 40. He told me what it was like to have a mother at 37, something I had forgotten because I lost her when I was still a child who didn't understand what death meant. But I also learned things making me feel less miserable about my own existence. The Daniel in prison told me he had killed someone in a bar fight, a single punch making the other guy fall, hit his head, and never get up again. He had been locked up for 6 years and had another 10 ahead. The Daniel in the wheelchair told me he had lost his wife and daughter in the same accident, leaving him paralyzed. Now he lived alone in an adapted apartment, depending on caregivers changing every few months, wondering every day why he had survived and they hadn't. We were all Daniel. We had all had the same chance to build a life. And we had all ended up in different places, some better and some worse, but all converging on the same endpoint: death at 38. A week after being added to the group, they started disappearing. The first was the Daniel living in Canada. One day he simply stopped replying to messages. His last text had been a photo of sunrise over Toronto, saying it was going to be a good day. After that, silence. His profile picture turned gray, and when I tried to view his info, an error message appeared as if the account had never existed, as if the phone number didn't correspond to any registered user. The other Daniels panicked. They started typing frantic messages asking if anyone knew what had happened, if anyone had spoken to him outside the group, if there was any way to contact him. They said they could feel something had changed, that there was a hole where before there was a presence, as if a part of themselves had been erased from the universe. One described the sensation as losing a memory you didn't know you had until it was gone. 3 days later, the Daniel who had married Clara disappeared. He was telling us an anecdote about his daughter, about how she had won a drawing contest at school, and suddenly his messages stopped appearing. He didn't even finish the sentence. The last text he sent was, "And when we saw the drawing," followed by nothing, just the void of an interrupted conversation. And then the one in prison. And then the one in the wheelchair. And then one who hadn't spoken much but I knew was there, reading, being part of this group of versions of the same person trying to understand why we were dying. Every time one disappeared, the others felt it, and I started feeling it too. It was like losing a memory you didn't know you had. A feeling of emptiness appearing suddenly without knowing why. A hole in the chest getting bigger with every Daniel ceasing to exist. The one with the beard wrote me a private message outside the group. It's accelerating. Before they died near their 38th birthday. Now they are dying sooner. Something is changing. I asked him what I could do, how I could avoid what was happening. His reply froze my blood. "We believe there is something connecting you to all of us. Something you did or failed to do, creating the branches. If we find that moment, maybe we can undo the damage. But for that, we need you to remember." He asked me if there was something in my past, some moment where I felt the world divide, some decision I made knowing the consequences would be irreversible. I thought for days. I reviewed my life looking for that crucial moment the other Daniels needed to find, but my life was so dull, so lacking in important moments, I couldn't identify anything causing branches in other realities. And then I remembered. I was 16, a year after my mother died. I was in the worst of depression, without desire to get out of bed, without reasons to keep going, unable to imagine a future not filled with the same gray pain I felt every morning opening my eyes. My father didn't know how to help me because he was also sunk in his own grief, crying at night when he thought I didn't hear him, surviving day by day, not knowing how to carry on without her. One night I went up to the roof of the building where my father and I lived. It was 3 in the morning and I hadn't been able to sleep, like so many other nights since the funeral. I climbed the stairs to the door leading to the roof, the one always locked but whose lock I had learned to pick with a wire. I stepped out into the cold night air and walked toward the edge. I approached the railing and looked down, toward the 8 stories of emptiness separating me from the ground, toward the street lights illuminating the sidewalk where no one passed at those hours. I thought it would be very easy to take one more step. A single step and everything would end. The pain and the loneliness and the certainty nothing would ever get better. A single step and I would stop feeling my chest weigh 1,000 kilos every time I breathed. But I didn't do it. Something stopped me. I don't know what it was. Maybe fear it would hurt. Maybe the image of my father finding himself alone the next day. Maybe some survival instinct I didn't know I had. I backed away from the edge with trembling legs, stumbled down the stairs, went back to my room and got into bed crying until dawn. I never told anyone what I had been about to do. I typed this in the group with hands trembling so much I could barely type. The only Daniel left besides me replied almost instantly. It was the one with the scar on his eyebrow. The one who had barely spoken since all this started. I took the step. In my reality, I jumped. But something happened in the air, something that shouldn't have happened. I fell for what seemed like hours and then woke up in the hospital with this scar and memories of other lives. I think that moment is what connects us all. The moment you decided to live created all the realities where different Daniels made different decisions. You are the trunk of the tree, and we are the branches. And now the tree is dying. I asked him what I could do to stop it. His reply took so long to arrive I thought he had disappeared too. When it arrived, it was just 2 words. Not me. The next day his profile picture turned gray, and the group was empty except for me. I was alone. 2 weeks had passed since they added me to the group and all versions of myself had disappeared. All except me, the original, the trunk of the tree rotting from the roots. The WhatsApp group remained in my chat list, empty except for old messages no one else could read. Sometimes I opened it and reread the conversations, fragments of lives that could have been mine, decisions I didn't make and paths I didn't travel. It was like reading the diary of a ghost, or many ghosts, all with my face and name but with stories never to be told again. I tried to continue with my normal life, but it was impossible. I went to work every morning because I didn't know what else to do. Because routine was the only thing keeping me anchored to a reality seeming less real every day. I sat in front of the computer staring at the screen seeing nothing, columns of numbers blurring while my mind got lost in the face of the Daniel who had been happy with Clara, in the snowy mountains of the Daniel living in Canada, in the voice of the mother I would never hear again. I thought about all the Daniels no longer existing, about all the lives erased as if they had never happened. The Daniel with the happy family now having no one to miss him because his wife and children didn't exist anymore either. The rich and successful Daniel having built an empire now dust in a reality collapsed upon itself. The Daniel whose mother was still alive, who had had 20 more years with her than I did. 20 years of Sunday calls and chicken soups and hugs I could only imagine. All gone. All dead before their time. And I would be next. I started counting the days left until turning 38, 92, 91, 90. Every day passing was one less day of life, one more step toward that end now known inevitable. 3 days ago I received a new message in the empty group. It wasn't from any of the Daniels I had met. It was from a number I didn't recognize, a number starting with a prefix not corresponding to any country I knew. The profile picture showed my face but with differences making me feel nauseous. Eyes sunken in sockets too deep, grayish skin like a corpse unburied for days, a smile showing too many teeth stretching lips at angles no human mouth should be able to reach. The message said, "We are also Daniel, the ones who never came to exist, the ones discarded before birth, and now we come to claim what belongs to us." Below was a date written in a strange format, numbers reversed as if written by someone not understanding how our calendar worked. The date of my 38th birthday, and a counter descending second by second, marking the time I had left with a precision that was obscene. I tried to leave the group. I pressed the leave button once, twice, 100 times. Every time a different error message appeared. You cannot leave this group. Your exit has been rejected. You belong here. I tried blocking the numbers, but more appeared. I tried uninstalling WhatsApp, but the app reinstalled itself. I tried throwing the phone in the trash, but the next day it was back on my nightstand. Screen on showing the group, and hundreds of new participants appeared while I slept. Now I know I'm not alone in this group. There are hundreds of participants appearing over the last few hours, all added without my permission, all with names variations of mine, all with my face but deformed in ways defying anatomy, all with that smile not mine, that predator smile having found its prey. All typing messages I don't understand in a language seeming Spanish, but words are wrong, twisted, inverted, as if someone had taken my mother tongue and passed it through a nightmare filter. And they all say the same thing, over and over, filling my screen with identical messages repeating to infinity. Soon we will be one. Soon you will cease to be the original. Soon we will take your place. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to escape a WhatsApp group I can't leave no matter how much I press the button. I don't know how to avoid a death seeming written in the very code of reality. The counter marks 89 days. 89 days until I turn 38. 89 days until I discover if the other Daniels were right. I only know the counter keeps going down second by second. And every time there are more Daniels smiling on my screen, filling my phone with messages I can't stop reading, waiting for the moment to take my place. Never connect to an open Wi-Fi network without knowing where it comes from. That's the first piece of advice you get when you start using the internet. My name is Sergio. I'm 25 years old and I've been receiving messages from people who died before I was born for a week. I've been studying computer engineering at the university for 6 years. I should have finished 2 years ago, but I failed several subjects and had to repeat a year. And then I ran out of money for tuition and had to work for a year to save up. And then my father got sick, and I had to move back home for a few months to help my mother. Life gets in the way when you try to make plans. That's something I've learned. Now I live in an apartment shared with 3 other students in an old neighborhood near campus. The building is over 100 years old, and it shows in every crack in the walls, in every pipe that makes strange noises at night, in every door that doesn't close properly because the frames have warped over the decades. But the rent is cheap and it's close to the faculty, so I don't complain. My room faces an interior courtyard shared with the building next door. It's a building that has been abandoned since I moved here 3 years ago, maybe longer, maybe since before I was born. It has windows boarded up with wooden planks rotting away with time, a facade covered in graffiti and old posters announcing concerts for bands that no longer exist, and a main door sealed with a rusty chain no one has bothered to remove. The first time I asked my roommates about the building, they shrugged. One said he thought there had been a fire a long time ago. Another said he heard it was full of squatters who left when the water and electricity were cut. None knew anything for certain, and none seemed to care much. It was just an old, ugly building marring the courtyard. Nothing more. But I'd always felt something strange when looking at it. A feeling that something was watching me from behind the planks covering the windows, from the shadows accumulating in corners where daylight never reached. Sometimes at night, I hear noises coming from there. Thumps and creaks my roommates say are rats or pigeons, but which have always seemed too rhythmic to me to be animals. Sometimes I'd swear I hear voices, murmurs that could be the wind passing through cracks or could be conversations of people who shouldn't be there. A week ago, I was in my room trying to study for an exam. It was late, past 2 in the morning, and our internet connection was especially slow because one of my roommates was downloading something consuming all the bandwidth. I needed to access some notes stored in the cloud, and the page wouldn't load. Frustrated, I opened the list of available Wi-Fi networks looking for an alternative. Usually, only the neighbors' networks appear, all password protected, but that night there was a network I had never seen before. It was named Santiago Building 1994. It had no password. The signal was strong, stronger than our own network. And when I looked out the window toward the abandoned building, I saw something that froze my blood. There was a light in one of the third-floor windows, a dim, bluish light flickering as if coming from a screen. I should have closed the window and forgotten about it. I should have waited for my roommate to finish his download and connected to our usual network. But I had an exam in a few hours. I needed those notes, and curiosity overcame common sense. I connected to the network. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The connection was fast, much faster than I expected for a network supposedly coming from an abandoned building. I opened the browser and loaded the notes page without any problem, and then my phone started vibrating. It was a notification from a messaging app I didn't remember installing. It was simply called Chat and had a gray icon with no design, as if it were a placeholder someone had forgotten to change. The message was from a user named Carmen3B. It said it had been a long time since she saw someone on the other side, asking if we had lived across the way for long. I stared at the screen, not knowing what to do. I thought it was spam, some kind of virus installed when connecting to the network. But something about the message felt strange. The tone was too natural, too human to be a bot. I typed asking who she was and how she got my number. The reply came almost instantly. It said she was Carmen, that she lived in apartment 3B of the Santiago building, and that the app gave her my number because I was connected to her network. She apologized if she had scared me, saying it had been a long time since she saw anyone in the building across the street, that everything was always so dark. I looked out the window toward the abandoned building. The third-floor windows were still boarded up, just like all the others. The bluish light I had seen before was gone. I typed that the Santiago building had been abandoned for years, that no one lived there. The reply took a little longer. She said she didn't understand, that she was there right now, that she had just had dinner with her husband and children. She said she could see my window from her living room, that I had the light on. A chill ran down my spine. I got up and turned off my room light. I approached the window and looked toward the building across the way. All the windows were still boarded up. There was no light, no movement, no sign of life. But another message appeared on my phone. She asked why I had turned off the light, said she had seen me get up, asked if I was okay. I closed the app and disconnected the Wi-Fi. I sat in the dark for a long time, listening to my heartbeat, trying to convince myself it had been a prank, a hacker with too much free time setting up a fake network to scare whoever connected. But I couldn't get what she said out of my head, that she had seen me turn off the light, that she could see my window from her living room. The next day I searched for information on the Santiago building. I started with a simple Google search, but the first results gave me nothing useful. Just mentions of the building and articles about abandoned urban planning, and some photos on an urban explorer's blog, dedicated to sneaking into forbidden places. But then, I found a link to the local newspaper's digital archive. What I found left me frozen. The building had been constructed in 1920 as housing for workers of a textile factory in the neighborhood. For decades it was a normal place, with families born and dying within its walls, with children playing in the interior courtyard now shared with my building, with neighbors knowing each other all their lives and celebrating holidays and funerals together. There were old photos in the articles I found, the building in its heyday, with windows open and clothes hanging on balconies, families posing at the entrance the day they moved in, children playing ball in the courtyard while their mothers watched from the windows, until 1994. In March of that year, there was a fire. It started in the basement at 3:15 in the morning, when most residents were sleeping. Someone was illegally storing flammable products in a storage room, cans of solvent and paint that became fuel when a short circuit in the electrical panel produced a spark. The fire spread throughout the building in minutes, climbing the stairwell like a chimney, blocking the only exit before anyone could react. Firefighters took 22 minutes to arrive. By then it was too late. 47 people died, entire families trapped in their apartments while the fire climbed floor by floor, filling the hallways with black smoke that killed before the flames arrived. Children jumping from windows trying to escape and crashing onto the courtyard pavement. Elderly people unable to get out of bed, dying in their sleep without knowing what was happening. The article I found described the scenes with stomach-churning detail. Testimonies from firefighters who entered after the fire was out. Descriptions of bodies found embracing in corners where they had tried to take shelter. The building was gutted inside, but the exterior structure remained standing. Authorities sealed it, and for years there were plans to demolish it, but bureaucratic procedures dragged on. and in the end it was abandoned, rotting slowly while the neighborhood grew around it. I searched the list of fire victims. Carmen Vasquez, 42 years old, apartment 3B, died with her husband and 2 children. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the boarded-up third-floor window. Imagined the fire consuming the rooms where a family had dined hours before. Heard screams existing only in my imagination. But at 3 in the morning, my phone vibrated again. The chat app was still installed, even though I was sure I had deleted it. And there was a new message. Carmen asked why I wasn't answering, if we had spoken yesterday, or if it had been longer. She said sometimes she struggled to remember, that days blended together there. I wasn't connected to the building's Wi-Fi. I was using my regular mobile data, but messages kept coming. I asked her with trembling fingers what year she thought it was. The reply came after a pause that felt eternal. She said 1994, March, that it was still cold, but you could tell spring was coming. She asked why I wanted to know. I felt the air thicken around me. 1994, March, the month of the fire. I didn't know what to answer. What do you tell someone who doesn't know they are dead? How do you explain she's been trapped in a loop for 30 years, sending messages through a Wi-Fi network that shouldn't exist? Before I could decide what to do, another message appeared, but it wasn't from Carmen. It was from a user named Pedro1A. He asked if I could see them too, said he thought no one could anymore, that they hadn't seen lights on in the surrounding buildings for years, that they thought we had abandoned them. And then another from Maria 5C. She said her daughter smelled smoke, that she always said the same thing, but she smelled nothing. And another from Antonio Tar 2D. He said it was hot, very hot, asking why it was so hot if it was March. Messages started arriving faster and faster. Dozens of users with different apartment names, all asking things, all confused, all trapped in a moment, repeating over and over for 3 decades. My phone got so hot I had to put it on the nightstand. The screen flickered with notifications accumulating faster than I could read them. Some messages were normal questions, about the weather or neighbors, but others were different. They asked why they couldn't leave their apartments. Said the stairs were blocked, asked if someone could help them. Said it smelled burnt, really burnt, that the children were crying, that they couldn't breathe, that please, someone help them. I turned off the phone by ripping out the battery because the power button wouldn't work. I sat on my bed shivering until dawn, and when I turned it back on, the messages were gone. The chat app was no longer installed. Everything seemed normal, but that night I saw the bluish light in the abandoned building's 3rd floor again. The following days I tried to convince myself it had been a hallucination. Exam stress, lack of sleep, my mind playing tricks on me. But every night at the same time, around 3 a.m., my phone vibrated, and the chat app reappeared with messages from the Santiago building residents. I learned things about them I didn't want to know. Things keeping me awake long after messages stopped arriving. Things etched in my mind like photographs from an album I couldn't close. Carmen told me her little son, Danielito, had nightmares every night for weeks. He dreamed of fire, she said, of a heat burning him inside, of walls melting around him while he screamed for help. She thought it was because they had watched a firefighter movie on TV, one of those American movies shown on Saturday nights. She told him not to be afraid, that firefighters were the good guys, that they always arrived in time to save everyone. She didn't know that promise would be broken in a few hours. Pedro from 1A told me he was saving to buy a new car, a red-seated Ibiza he had seen at a downtown dealership, with air conditioning and cassette player, a total luxury for the time. He wanted to take his wife on vacation to the beach that summer. It was their 25th wedding anniversary, and they hadn't left the city in too long because there were always more urgent expenses. He showed me a photo of the car, or so he said, but on my screen only a gray square appeared that wouldn't finish loading. Maria from 5C told me her husband hadn't returned from work. She had been waiting for hours, sitting by the window watching the street, wondering if he missed the bus or stopped for a drink with colleagues without telling her. She didn't know he had died at the factory the day before, crushed by a machine that malfunctioned while working overtime to earn money they would no longer need. She didn't know he would never come home. that she would die that same night without knowing what happened, without being able to say goodbye, without understanding why the fire took everything when she just wanted her husband back for dinner. They all lived the same day over and over, March 23, 1994. The day before the fire for some, the day of the fire for others, depending on what time the fire reached their apartments. Some were trapped in the afternoon, having dinner with their families unaware of what would come next. Others were trapped at night, waking up to the smell of smoke, looking for an exit that didn't exist, and they all spoke to me as if I were their only contact with the outside world, their only window to a reality existing beyond the charred walls of the Santiago building. I tried to warn them. I wrote to Carmen that there was a fire, that she had to leave the building to take her children and go down the stairs before it was too late. Her reply broke my soul. She said there was no fire, that she had just checked. She asked if I was okay, said she was worried because I'd been saying strange things for days. They couldn't hear me. They couldn't change what had already happened. They were trapped in a loop with no exit, condemned to repeat the worst day of their lives until the end of time. One night I decided to do something stupid. I hadn't slept well for days, obsessed with the messages, with the stories they told me, with the feeling there was something I could do even if I didn't know what. I told myself I just wanted to see the building from inside, check with my own eyes it was empty, that the messages came from somewhere else, from some elaborate prank or my own mind starting to invent things, but deep down I knew I was looking for something else. I left my building at 3 a.m. when I was sure my roommates were asleep and no one would see me do what I was going to do. I crossed the interior courtyard feeling the night chill in my bones, the heavy silence of dead hours where only insomniacs and ghosts are awake. The Santiago building door waited for me on the other side, sealed with its rusty chain, watched by a streetlight flickering as if about to go out. With bolt cutters I found in my apartment storage room, among old tools left by previous tenants, I managed to cut the chain after several attempts. The door opened with a creak echoing in the night silence, a sound of metal on metal making my hair stand on end. The interior was completely dark, darker than it should be because the streetlight couldn't penetrate beyond the threshold. The smell of burning hit me like a slap, a smell still there after 30 years, impregnated in the walls, the floor, the air itself filling the building, mixed with mold and dampness, with dust from decades of abandonment, with something else I didn't want to identify. I turned on my phone flashlight and started climbing the stairs. Steps creaked under my feet with every stride, rotten wood giving way slightly under my weight, threatening to break at any moment. Walls were covered in soot and marks I preferred not to examine too closely. Handprints dragged searching for an exit. Fingernail scratches trying to open doors that wouldn't budge. Silence was absolute, so dense I could hear my own blood circulating through veins, my shallow breathing forming small vapor clouds in the cold air. No rats, no pigeons, nothing of the life normally colonizing abandoned buildings. Just emptiness and the smell of death 30 years hadn't managed to erase. On every landing were doors leading to apartments, some wide-open showing rooms destroyed by fire, furniture turned to ash, blackened walls where frames of pictures and mirrors melted by heat could still be seen. Other doors were closed forever, swollen by water firefighters used to extinguish the blaze, sealing what remained of their occupants on the other side. I didn't want to think about what was behind those closed doors. I reached the 3rd floor. The door to 3B was ajar. I pushed with a trembling hand and entered what remained of Carmen's apartment. Fire had destroyed almost everything. Furniture was charred skeletons. Walls were black with soot. The ceiling had collapsed in some areas, revealing wooden beams that had supported the floor above. But in the center of the living room, on the only patch of floor not covered in debris or ash, was something making no sense. Something that shouldn't be there. Something defying all logic. A router. A modern white rectangular router, the type internet companies install when you get fiber optics. It had blinking lights on the front, one green and one blue shining in the darkness of the destroyed room. And it was connected to nothing because there was no electricity or cables or infrastructure to power it. The blue light I'd seen from my window all these nights came from there, from that impossible little device in the middle of a charred living room where a family had died 3 decades ago. I approached not knowing what I expected to find, heart beating so hard it seemed to want to escape my chest. The router had a label stuck on the side, a white sticker with black letters showing the network name, Santiago Building 1994. And below, handwritten in black marker and calligraphy looking old, like from another era, a phrase making me back away until hitting the soot wall. Thank you for listening to us. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a message from Carmen 3B. She said she saw me, that she was in her living room, asking why I had taken so long to come. I looked around, but there was no one. Just the ruins of a home where a family had died 30 years ago. Another message arrived. She said they were leaving now, that the fire was coming, but wanted to thank me before going. And another saying to take care of the router, that there were more people needing someone to listen to them. And one more, the last, saying goodbye and thanks for not forgetting them. The router lights went out suddenly, as if someone had flipped an invisible switch. Darkness wrapped around me completely, denser than before, more absolute. A darkness seeming to have weight and texture. And then I heard something. A creak on the stairs. The sound of footsteps climbing slowly, step by step, approaching the 3rd floor. They weren't my steps because I was paralyzed in the 3B living room, daring not to move. They were other steps. Steps that shouldn't exist in a building where everyone had died 30 years ago. Another message arrived. She said they were leaving now, that the fire was coming but wanted to thank me before going. And another saying to take care of the router, that there were more people needing someone to listen to them. And one more, the last, saying goodbye and thanks for not forgetting them. The router lights went out suddenly, as if someone had flipped an invisible switch. Darkness wrapped around me completely, denser than before, more absolute. A darkness seeming to have weight and texture. And then I heard something, a creak on the stairs, the sound of footsteps climbing slowly, step by step, approaching the 3rd floor. They weren't my steps because I was paralyzed in the 3B living room, daring not to move. They were other steps. Steps that shouldn't exist in a building where everyone had died 30 years ago. I ran out of there, pushing the apartment door, stumbling down the stairs without looking back, thinking of nothing but getting out of that place before whatever was coming up reached me. I tripped twice, hit my shoulder against a wall, almost fell on the 1st landing, but didn't stop until I was outside the building breathing the cold night air. When I returned to my room and looked out the window, the 3rd floor windows were no longer boarded up. They were open. Empty, as if someone had opened them from inside to let out what had been trapped for 3 decades. That was 3 days ago. Messages from Carmen and the other Santiago building residents stopped arriving. The chat app disappeared from my phone. The router is no longer in the 3B living room, but the Wi-Fi network keeps appearing in my available connections list. And sometimes when I connect, I receive messages from other people from other buildings, other cities, all dead. All trapped, all looking for someone to listen to them. I don't know who put that router there or why they chose me. I only know every night I connect and listen to them, because sometimes that's the only thing the dead need, someone to know they existed.